Princess Isabella stood at the grand window of Rosewood Palace, watching the morning mist roll across the royal gardens. Her emerald dress rustled softly as she turned away from the view that once brought her peace. Today was different. Today, everything would change forever. The palace had been her home for 8 years since marrying Prince Alexander, heir to the throne of Valdoria. Their love story had captured the hearts of millions, a commoner who became a princess, a fairy tale come to life. But fairy tales, Isabella had learned, often hide darker truths beneath their golden surface. Alexander entered their private chambers, his face grave and distant. He had been like this for weeks now, ever since his father, King Frederick, had fallen ill. The weight of future kingship pressed heavily on his shoulders, changing the warm, caring man she had married into someone she barely recognized. "The doctors say father may have only months left," Alexander said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "The council has been pushing for immediate preparations. There are things we need to discuss, Isabella." She felt her heart sink. Those words, "things we need to discuss," never led to good news in royal families. She had seen enough palace politics to know when something terrible was coming. "What kind of things?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. Alexander finally looked at her, and she saw pain in his blue eyes. But there was something else too. Resignation. "The council believes that when I become king, I need a queen who was born into royalty, someone who understands the old traditions, the ancient bloodlines that our people respect." The words hit Isabella like physical blows. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Lady Victoria Ashworth has been mentioned. She comes from one of the oldest noble families in Europe. Her bloodline traces back to the founding of our kingdom. Alexander's voice was mechanical, as if he was reciting a speech someone else had written. Isabella felt the room spinning. Lady Victoria, the tall, elegant blonde who had been appearing at more and more royal functions lately. The woman who seemed to know exactly what to say and when to say it, who moved through royal protocol like she was born to it, which of course she was. "And what about our marriage? What about our vows? What about love?" Isabella's voice cracked on the last word. Alexander turned away again. "Love is a luxury that kings cannot always afford. My duty is to the crown, to the people. They need stability, tradition. They need someone who can unite the old noble families." "They need someone who isn't me, you mean?" The tears Isabella had been fighting finally spilled over. 8 years, Alexander. 8 years I've given to this kingdom, to these people, to you. I've learned their customs, spoken their language, visited their hospitals and schools. I've tried so hard to be worthy of being their princess." "You have been wonderful," Alexander said, his own voice breaking slightly. "But being wonderful isn't enough anymore. Not when the crown is at stake." Isabella thought of all the nights she had stayed up studying Valdorian history, all the language lessons, all the times she had bitten her tongue when the older nobles made snide comments about her background. She had transformed herself completely, given up her old life, her old identity, all for this man and this kingdom. "When?" she whispered. "The formal announcement will be made after Father's funeral. The annulment papers are already being prepared. You'll be given a generous settlement, a title in your own right, a estate in the countryside. You'll be comfortable for the rest of your life." Comfortable. As if comfort could fill the hole that would be left in her heart. As if money could replace the life they had built together, the dreams they had shared, the children they had planned to have. "Does she know? Victoria?" Isabella asked. Alexander's silence was answer enough. Isabella felt something break inside her chest. Not just her heart, something deeper. Her faith in love, in loyalty, in the man she had thought she knew better than anyone else in the world. "I see." So while I was playing the devoted wife, you were already planning my replacement. Her voice was steadier now, cold with a new kind of pain. It isn't like that, Isabella. This isn't what I wanted. But sometimes we have to choose between what we want and what we must do. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. The man she had fallen in love with 9 years ago in that little coffee shop in Paris seemed like a stranger now. That Alexander had laughed easily, had talked about changing the monarchy to be more modern, more connected to regular people. This Alexander spoke of duty and tradition and noble bloodlines like they were more important than the human heart. "No," she said quietly, "we don't have to choose. You're choosing. You're choosing the easy path, the one that keeps the old men in suits happy, the one that doesn't require you to fight for anything that really matters." Alexander's face flushed red. "Easy? You think any of this is easy? Do you know what it's like to carry the weight of an entire kingdom? To know that every decision you make affects millions of people?" "I know what it's like to love someone who promised to face those burdens with me," Isabella shot back. "I know what it's like to believe in vows that apparently meant nothing the moment they became inconvenient." The argument was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Alexander's personal secretary, James, entered with obvious reluctance. "Your Highness, forgive the interruption, but Queen Mother Duchess Margaret has requested an immediate meeting with Princess Isabella. She's waiting in the blue drawing room." Isabella's blood ran cold. Queen Mother Margaret, Alexander's stepmother, the woman who had married King Frederick after his first wife died. Margaret had never liked Isabella, had never missed an opportunity to remind her that she wasn't truly royal. If Margaret was involved in this meeting, it meant the plan to replace Isabella was more advanced than Alexander had admitted. "Tell her I'll be there shortly," Isabella said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. After James left, Alexander reached out to touch her arm. "Isabella, please try to understand. Margaret only wants what's best for the kingdom." Isabella pulled away from his touch. "Don't pretend this is about the kingdom when we both know this is about Margaret finally getting what she's wanted since the day we married. Me gone." She walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "You know what the saddest part is? I would have stood by you through anything. I would have learned whatever I needed to learn, done whatever needed to be done. I would have been the queen this kingdom needed, not because of my blood, but because of my heart. But you never even gave me the chance to try." With that, she left Alexander standing alone in their chambers, surrounded by all the luxury and privilege that suddenly felt as empty as her future. The walk to the blue drawing room felt like a march to her execution. Isabella had always hated that room. It was Margaret's favorite, decorated in cold blues and silvers that matched the woman's personality perfectly. As she approached the ornate double doors, Isabella could hear voices inside. Not just Margaret's refined tones, but another voice. A younger woman's voice. Lady Victoria Ashworth was already there. Isabella paused outside the door, gathering her courage. Whatever was about to happen in that room, she knew it would change everything. Her life as she knew it was about to end. But perhaps, just perhaps, she could end it with her dignity intact. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked into the room to face her future, and the woman who was about to take her place. The blue drawing room was exactly as Isabella expected, cold, formal, and designed to make anyone who wasn't born into royalty feel small. Queen Mother Margaret sat regally in her favorite chair, her silver hair perfectly styled, her ice-blue eyes calculating. Beside her, Lady Victoria Ashworth perched on the edge of an antique sofa, looking every inch the perfect future queen. Victoria was beautiful in the way that noble women often were, tall, pale, with golden hair that seemed to catch light even in the dim room. Her posture was flawless, her dress impeccable, her smile practiced and empty. Everything Isabella had worked so hard to become, Victoria simply was by birth. "Isabella, dear, please sit," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We have so much to discuss." Isabella remained standing. "I prefer to hear what you have to say on my feet." Margaret's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Very well. Victoria and I thought it would be beneficial for all parties if we could speak openly about the situation." "You mean my husband's plan to throw me away like yesterday's newspaper?" Isabella's voice was calm, but her eyes flashed with fire. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. For all her breeding and training, she clearly hadn't expected such directness. "Princess Isabella, I want you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. The council approached my family, not the other way around." "How noble of you to mention that," Isabella replied. "I'm sure you put up quite a fight against becoming future queen." Margaret intervened before Victoria could respond. "Isabella, there's no need for sarcasm. We're all adults here and we all understand what's at stake. The kingdom needs stability during this transition period. Your background simply doesn't provide the historical legitimacy that the crown requires." "My background." Isabella repeated the words slowly. "You mean the fact that my father was a teacher and my mother ran a small bakery? The fact that I worked for my education instead of inheriting it? The fact that I chose to love your stepson instead of being bred to marry him?" "I mean," Margaret said sharply, "that noble bloodlines exist for a reason. They carry centuries of diplomatic knowledge, political understanding, and royal protocol. These things cannot be learned, Isabella. They must be inherited." Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Inherited like your own noble bloodline, Margaret? Because if I remember correctly, you were a diplomat's daughter before you married the king. Hardly ancient royalty yourself." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Margaret's face flushed red, but she maintained her composure. "My situation was entirely different. Frederick was not the heir when we married. There was no pressure on the crown. No, there was just pressure on a lonely widower who needed someone to help him raise his son," Isabella shot back. "But please, don't let facts interfere with your revisionist history." Victoria looked increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Perhaps we could focus on moving forward rather than relitigating the past?" Isabella turned her full attention to Victoria for the first time. "Oh, by all means, let's talk about moving forward. Tell me, Lady Victoria, what exactly did they promise you? The crown? The palace? Or just the chance to finally put that expensive education in royal etiquette to practical use?" Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "I was raised to serve my country in whatever capacity was needed. If that means supporting Prince Alexander as he becomes king, then I'm prepared to do my duty." "Duty?" Isabella tasted the word like poison. Such a convenient word. It covers a multitude of sins, doesn't it? Ambition, betrayal, the destruction of other people's lives, all acceptable as long as you call it duty. "Your marriage to Alexander was always meant to be temporary," Margaret said coldly, abandoning all pretense of politeness. "Surely you understood that? A commoner marrying the heir to the throne? It was romantic, yes, but hardly sustainable. You've had 8 good years. Many people never get that much." Isabella felt as if she'd been slapped. "Temporary? Is that what you told yourself when you smiled at our wedding? When you held our hands during the blessing? When you welcomed me into this family?" "I did what was necessary to maintain family harmony while we dealt with more pressing matters," Margaret replied. "But Frederick's illness changes everything. Alexander needs a queen who can unite the noble houses, someone the old families will respect and support. Someone like Victoria, whose family has been trying to marry into the royal line for 3 generations," Isabella said. She had done her homework over the years, knew the history of every major noble family in Valdoria. Victoria's face went white. "That's not... My family has always served the crown loyally." "Oh, I'm sure they have. Especially when it served their interests." Isabella walked closer to Victoria, studying her like a scientist examining a specimen. "Tell me, Victoria, do you love him? Or is this just another family business transaction?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. "I thought so," Isabella said quietly. "Well, at least you're honest about it. That's more than I can say for my husband." Margaret stood up abruptly. "This conversation is becoming unproductive. Isabella, the decisions have been made. Fighting them will only make the transition more difficult for everyone involved." "Transition," Isabella repeated. "Such a clean word for destroying someone's life." "Your life isn't being destroyed," Margaret snapped. "You're being given a generous settlement, a title, property. Many women would be grateful for such provisions." Isabella stared at Margaret for a long moment, then began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle but grew into something deeper, more bitter. "Grateful? You think I should be grateful that you're tossing me aside like a used dress, but you're letting me keep some jewelry." "You're being dramatic," Margaret said dismissively. "Am I? Let me tell you what I'm losing, Margaret. I'm losing the man I thought I knew, the life I built, the future I planned. I'm losing the children I hoped to have, the legacy I wanted to leave. I'm losing the chance to serve people I've grown to love, to make a difference in a kingdom I've given everything to." Isabella's voice grew stronger with each word. "But most of all, I'm losing my faith in the institution I believed in, the family I thought I belonged to, and the vows that I thought meant something eternal." Victoria looked down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable with Isabella's raw emotion. Margaret, however, seemed unmoved. "Sentiment is a luxury we cannot afford," Margaret said coldly. "The crown is bigger than any one person's happiness." "The crown is nothing without the people who wear it," Isabella replied. "And if this is the kind of people you want wearing it, people who break promises, who abandon love for convenience, who value bloodlines over character, then maybe this kingdom deserves whatever future you're building for it." A new voice interrupted from the doorway. "Maybe it does." Everyone turned to see Alexander standing in the entrance, his face haggard. Isabella wondered how long he had been listening, how much he had heard. "Alexander, dear, we were just finishing up," Margaret said smoothly. But Alexander held up a hand to stop her. "No, I think you were just getting started," he said. His eyes met Isabella's across the room, and for a moment she saw a flicker of the man she had fallen in love with. "I came to find Isabella because I realized I had more to say." Isabella's heart jumped involuntarily, hope fluttering in her chest despite everything. "And what did you want to say?" Alexander walked fully into the room, his presence changing the entire dynamic. Margaret and Victoria suddenly looked less sure of themselves, less in control. "I wanted to say that you were right, about the choice, about taking the easy path." Alexander's voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the silent room. "I wanted to say that I've been a coward, and that I've been letting other people make decisions about my life, about our life, because it was easier than fighting." Margaret stood up sharply. "Alexander, you cannot be serious. We've already made commitments. The arrangements with Victoria's family, the council meetings, the plans for the announcement can all be undone," Alexander said firmly, "because I've realized something important. A king who cannot keep his word to the woman he loves cannot be trusted to keep his word to his people." Isabella felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't tears of grief. "Alexander—" "I'm not finished," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. I also realized that if I become king by abandoning the person who makes me a better man, then I don't deserve to be king at all. Victoria finally found her voice. Prince Alexander, surely you're not thinking clearly. The stress of your father's illness, the pressure of succession. Perhaps we should postpone this conversation until you've had time to rest. Alexander turned to Victoria with a look that made her shrink back into the sofa. Lady Victoria, I appreciate your family's loyalty to the crown. But my wife was right about one thing. I never gave her the chance to prove what kind of queen she could be. I was too busy listening to people who told me what was impossible instead of working to make the possible happen. Margaret's composure finally cracked completely. This is madness! Alexander, you cannot throw away centuries of tradition for some romantic notion. The noble families will never accept this. The council will revolt. Your father will be devastated. My father married for love the second time, Alexander said quietly. With you, Margaret. And if the noble families cannot accept a queen who has proven her worth through 8 years of dedicated service, then perhaps it's time for new noble families. The room erupted into chaos. Margaret began arguing about political consequences and constitutional crises. Victoria sat in stunned silence, clearly processing the collapse of her carefully planned future. And in the middle of it all, Alexander walked across the room to Isabella. I can't take back what I said, what I was planning to do, he told her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. But I can promise you this. If you'll give me another chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that love doesn't make us weaker. It makes us stronger. Isabella looked into his eyes, searching for any sign that this was just another political maneuver, another calculated move in the endless game of royal chess. But all she saw was the man she had fallen in love with, flawed, scared, but finally willing to fight for what mattered. The chaos continued around them as Margaret and Victoria tried to salvage their plans, but Isabella only heard Alexander's voice asking quietly, "Can you forgive me?" Her answer would change everything, not just for them, but for the entire kingdom. Isabella looked into Alexander's eyes for what felt like an eternity. Around them, Margaret's voice grew more shrill as she enumerated all the political disasters that would follow, while Victoria sat frozen like a beautiful statue whose pedestal had just crumbled. But in that moment, Isabella heard only the sound of her own heartbeat and the echo of 8 years of memories. Forgiveness isn't given, Alexander, she said finally, her voice steady and clear. It's earned. His face fell slightly, but she wasn't finished. But love. Love is a choice we make every day. And despite everything that's happened, despite the pain and the betrayal and the broken promises, I choose love. I choose us. But this is the last time I make that choice without knowing you'll make it too. The relief that flooded Alexander's face was immediate and overwhelming. He reached for her hands, and this time she didn't pull away. I swear to you, Isabella, on my father's crown and my own soul, that I will never let anyone make me choose between duty and love again. Because you are both. You are my duty to myself, to the man I want to be, and to the king this kingdom deserves. Margaret's voice cut through their moment like a blade. This is absolutely unacceptable. Alexander, you cannot simply ignore the political realities. The council will never approve this decision. The noble families who support your claim to the throne will withdraw their backing. You'll be starting a constitutional crisis that could destroy the monarchy entirely. Alexander turned to face his stepmother, but kept Isabella's hand firmly in his own. Then we'll face that crisis together, and if the monarchy cannot survive having a queen who was chosen for love rather than bloodline, then perhaps the monarchy needs to change. Change? Margaret's voice rose to a near shriek. 500 years of tradition and you want to throw it all away for her? Not throw it away, Alexander corrected. Evolve it. Make it something better, something worthy of the people we serve. Victoria finally found her voice, though it was much smaller than it had been when the meeting started. Prince Alexander, I hope you understand that this decision affects more than just your personal happiness. My family has already made significant political and financial commitments based on our understanding. Lady Victoria, Alexander interrupted gently, I deeply regret any inconvenience this causes your family. But surely you understand that a marriage based on political convenience would be unfair to both of us. You deserve someone who chooses you for yourself, not for your bloodline. Victoria's composure finally cracked. Easy enough to say when you have what you want, but what about what I was promised? What about my future? Isabella felt an unexpected surge of sympathy for the other woman. Victoria, can I ask you something? When you imagined being queen, what did you dream about? Victoria looked startled by the question. What do you mean? I mean, what did you picture yourself doing? What kind of queen did you want to be? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the unfamiliar concept of being asked about her own desires rather than her family's plans. I wanted to focus on education, rural schools particularly. I studied education policy at university before other obligations took precedence. Then do that, Isabella said simply. Alexander, the kingdom needs education reform, doesn't it? Perhaps Lady Victoria could head a royal commission on rural schooling. She could make a real difference without needing a crown to do it. Margaret looked appalled at the suggestion. Isabella, you cannot be serious. Victoria was meant to be queen, not some glorified school inspector. I was meant to be nobody, Isabella replied. But I chose to be somebody. Maybe it's time Victoria had the same opportunity. Alexander was staring at Isabella with something approaching awe. A Royal Education Commission. Victoria, would that interest you? You'd have significant resources, real authority to make changes. For the first time since Isabella had entered the room, Victoria looked genuinely interested in something. Yes, that would be meaningful work. Margaret threw up her hands in exasperation. This is madness, all of it. Alexander, your father will be furious when he hears about this disaster. Then let's go tell him together, Alexander said calmly. Let's go explain to him that his son has chosen to honor his marriage vows and build a kingdom based on merit rather than bloodline. He's dying, Alexander. This stress could kill him. Isabella stepped forward. Or it could give him peace, knowing that his son has learned to make difficult decisions based on love and principle rather than fear and tradition. Alexander nodded. Margaret, I know you believe you're protecting the crown, but sometimes the best way to protect something is to let it grow and change. If we cling too tightly to the past, we'll lose the future. Margaret stared at them both for a long moment, her face cycling through anger, disbelief, and finally grudging resignation. This will be a disaster, she said quietly. The old families will revolt. The council will demand your abdication. The press will have a field day. Let them, Isabella said. We'll face it together. And we'll win, Alexander added, because we'll be fighting for something real, a monarchy that serves its people rather than demanding they serve it. Margaret gathered her dignity around herself like armor. Very well, but don't expect me to clean up the political mess when this romantic fantasy collides with reality. She swept from the room in a rustle of silk and indignation, leaving Alexander, Isabella, and Victoria in sudden, awkward silence. Victoria was the first to speak. I should go. My family will need to be told about the change in plans. Victoria, Isabella called as she reached the door. That education commission offer was genuine. If you're interested, we could meet next week to discuss it properly. Victoria turned back, her expression unreadable. Why would you do that? Why would you help me after everything? Isabella considered the question carefully. Because you're not my enemy. The system that told us we had to compete for one man's attention instead of working together to serve our people, that's the enemy. Maybe it's time we change that too. Something shifted in Victoria's face. Surprise, then thoughtfulness, then the beginning of what might have been respect. I think I would like that very much. After Victoria left, Alexander and Isabella were finally alone. The silence between them was different now. Not the cold distance of the morning, but something new and tentative, like the first thaw after a long winter. "So," Alexander said eventually, "how angry is the rest of the kingdom going to be when they find out their future king nearly threw away his marriage for political convenience?" Isabella laughed, and the sound surprised them both. "Probably not as angry as they'll be when they find out their future queen called the Queen Mother a political opportunist to her face." "You did do that, didn't you?" Alexander grinned for the first time in weeks. "That was magnificently terrifying. Someone had to. She's been bullying people with that noble bloodline nonsense for years. It was past time someone called her on it." Alexander pulled her closer, and this time she melted into his arms without reservation. "Isabella, I know I have a lot to make up for. I know trust isn't rebuilt overnight." "No, it's not," she agreed. "But love gives us reasons to try." They stood together in the blue drawing room, surrounded by centuries of royal tradition, but creating something entirely new. Outside, the kingdom continued its daily rhythms, unaware that their future had just taken a dramatic turn toward something unprecedented, a monarchy built on love, choice, and the radical idea that the best person for a job might not always be the one born to it. 3 hours later, they sat with King Frederick in his private study. The king was frailer than Isabella had seen him, but his eyes were still sharp and intelligent. He listened without interruption as Alexander explained the morning's events, the decision to honor his marriage, and the new direction he wanted to take the monarchy. When Alexander finished, the king was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to smile. "Do you know," he said, his voice weak but warm, "I was wondering when you were going to remember who you really are. I was starting to worry that boy who fell in love with a baker's daughter in Paris had been completely replaced by a politician." Isabella felt tears spring to her eyes. "Your Majesty, I want you to know that I will work every day to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me." King Frederick reached out and took her hand. "My dear girl, you've been proving your worth for 8 years. It was everyone else who needed to catch up." He turned to Alexander. "Son, the crown is not a burden to be endured. It's a privilege to be earned every single day by serving people who deserve better than we've given them. If Isabella makes you a better man, then she'll make you a better king." "The council won't like this decision," Alexander warned. "The council works for the crown, not the other way around," King Frederick replied firmly. "And if they can't accept that, they're welcome to find new employment." As the sun set over Valdoria that evening, Isabella stood once again at the window of her chambers, the chambers she would not be leaving after all. Alexander joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Isabella thought about the question seriously. The morning had brought the worst pain she'd ever experienced, but also clarity about what really mattered. The afternoon had brought uncertainty about the future, but also hope that love could triumph over convention. "Just one," she said finally. Alexander tensed. "What's that?" Isabella turned in his arms, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I regret that I didn't get to see Margaret's face when Victoria tells her she's accepted the Education Commission." Alexander burst out laughing, the sound echoing through the palace corridors where it mingled with the ancient stones and centuries of royal history. But this laughter was different from all the royal laughter that had come before. It was real, honest, and unafraid. It was the sound of a monarchy learning to change, led by two people who had chosen love over convenience, growth over tradition, and each other over everything else the world had told them was more important. Outside their window, the kingdom slept peacefully, unaware that their future had just become something far more interesting than anyone could have imagined.